I'm going to start as people come in. Yesterday, there was a little bit of a glitch. My opening remarks was not recorded. And for me, this is really important that the message gets out there beyond just all of us who are here today. We are making field meeting available in video recording on YouTube. And hopefully at some time in the future, an institution actually will value it enough to archive it seriously so that it lives on for centuries. Because I do believe that everyone here, they're doing such incredible revolutionary work in their own way, shifting themselves internally. And I believe that we can leave some traces of what we've been thinking and doing and feeling at a moment where it feels like the world is really in chaos and incredible turbulence. Although I can't recall any moment in history where there hasn't been turbulence. So in the midst of turbulence, in the midst of chaos, in the midst of a lot of pain out there, here we are today trying to create some serene space for us to feel ourselves, think about really important things and how we can transform ourselves. This is what field meeting really is for me. So I will perform my opening remarks from yesterday. So those of you who heard of it, please bear with it, because this and the first piece by Anthony Lee was not recorded. I want to thank Ambika Tracy, Managing Director of ACAW, who's been working incredibly hard for the last 3.5 years along my side. I said yesterday that I feel like a superwoman with wings with her on my side. And I just thank God for her every day in my life. Michelle Lowe, who has come on board since March as Development Director of Asia Contemporary Art Week, has been an indispensable support in all fronts with ACAW. Thanks to her again. Our interns, Kathy, Shinye, and Audrey, has been supporting this program for a couple of months, and we couldn't have done this without them, and also our volunteers who are downstairs and allowing everyone to flow in here and running things. Thank you so much. Thanks so much also for Hunter College Art Galleries, who graciously have they decided very late in the game to host us. We're really thankful for their effort and their time, and also that this is a collaboration where they're really putting a lot of effort behind it. Most of you are aware that this is the 10th anniversary or the 10th edition of Asia Contemporary Art Week, although it's been around since 2001, founded by a group of incredible collectors, directors, museum curators who were interested in creating a voice for contemporary art from Asia and contextualizing it properly within the New York art scene, which at the time was quite Eurocentric. It has grown to what you have experienced it in the last 5 to 6 years. I came on board in 2005, and my work has been to grow this body, to broaden it as much as possible, so that not just Asia-specific institutions are part of it, but also very broad institutions like museums such as MoMA, the Guggenheim, Whitney, Brooklyn Museum, Queens Museum continue to be part of it, as well as galleries who don't necessarily represent Asia artists all year long, but are willing to represent some artists during the week and be part of this platform. But also to really represent the diversity of what Asia is across entire continent, so beyond the perception in the United States, which has also shifted dramatically, where at one time Asia was considered as Japan, China, Korea, is now including a whole lot of South Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and ironically and incredibly the Middle East, which was always sort of hanging somewhere in the air and never really connected to the Asian continent. So a lot has been achieved through my own work and the incredible work of so many independent curators, scholars, artists who have become, curators and scholars in their own right, really digging up so much history for us through their works across Asia. So the transformation that has taken place in what's going on inside Asia, which for me was always important, not just for Asia to be presented here in the United States, but also the communication between inside of Asia itself, because there's been so many fragmentations because of the various different things that took place in the 20th century and the 19th century, because of all the various different isms, schisms that really created a fragmentation in Asia, and there was not much communication. For example, only just 10 years ago, 5 years ago actually, really was the first time when there was Indian artists actually finally exhibiting in China, and Chinese artists showing up in India, and Central Asian artists showing in Indonesia. So there's a lot of incredible activity that's taking place between Asian nations and between artists and institutions that is really inspiring, and that is another tier that I kind of want to show and create space for and make visible here in the States, that it's Asia is just so there, it's so broad, there's so much happening, and the ratio of the activity there really is not at all, just doesn't show up here. And so field meeting for me is also a format whereby it's not just about dealing with exhibitions that require phenomenal attention in terms of budgets and shipping and a lot of different kinds of logistics that maybe frightens people to explore. And so field meeting really is also a way of just getting to the bottom of the essence of what the artists are doing and exposing the works and the activities and researches in a way that institutions, curators, and people who are really interested in the content decide to invest in on their own. So it's a spreading of the seeds, and hopefully all of you who are here today or yesterday, that you were there yesterday, will look at the works more profoundly, do your own research, connect with those who are presenting, and hopefully there will be a lot of relationships forged through field meeting. Last year's relationships are manifesting until today. This year there was not only connections made between the presenters, the speakers, the artists who almost came together like a class and felt so united energetically, and are continuing to sort of be connected with each other. There's been residencies and writings and videos and all kinds of projects that have sprung through last year's program. So I'm hoping that continues. We have actually Valerie, who's come all the way from Hong Kong just to be with us. Map Office last year presented at field meeting, and she made the trip just to be present here today. And thank you so much for both of you for being here. And of course, Craig is here too. So I'm going on and on because I'm nervous. So I'm just gonna, let's see, what's important here? I think I talked a lot about thinking performance, why this year's field meeting is focusing on performance. and the importance of taking performance and having it show up in a different light, not just in the perspective of performance art, but allowing it to just for us to think about how has it been revealing itself already for centuries through different artistic mediums, different artistic practices, and to just allow ourselves to be open to exploring this medium, because to me, it's really showing up in so many different ways in artists' practices, and I've had to leave room for digesting it currently. And last session was such a relevant discussion, because no one could actually pinpoint, and there were so many different points of views and perspectives, and they all had they were all valid. I want to talk about a little bit about our signature program, Lee Mingwei's beautiful performance exhibition, Sonic Blossom, at the Metropolitan Museum. Actually, the focus of this year's field meeting and ACAW on performance came about partially out of a studio visit that I had with Lee Mingwei in the fall of 2013. I had been thinking about Mingwei's performance practice for a while, indeed in connection to his growing up in between Taiwan, Asia, and California, United States. During his mending project in 2010, I interviewed him for an hour, during which he mended one of my favorite embroidered shirts from Central Asia that was destroyed because I wore it so much, and talking about his childhood experiences and observations that subtly enter so many of his works. I recognized a mark, a particular gesture, which I believe is embedded in Asian continental spiritual thought, such as Taoism and Sufism. The way in which Mingwei incorporates giving, the concept of a gift in performance, which is essentially an exchange with one individual at one time. It is a very non-invasive but still intimate and alluring, an Eastern fluxus sensibility for initiating and letting go at the same time, like an acupuncture needle gently allowing a flow of energy. A manner so different from the quintessential provocative, in-your-face performance practices of artists generally elsewhere in the world in the past 30 years. Although we do have examples of the kind of performance that the not-in-your-face performances of artists around the world, including the Fluxus group. At the time of my studio visit, Mingwei was preparing for his major Mori Art Museum exhibition in Japan. I was impressed that a major museum in Asia was organizing a retrospective of more than 20 years of performance work by one artist. Shocking. I mean, this, after all, happens only once a decade or so here in the United States, and only recently. Mingwei was generously going over a PowerPoint with his works with me in his beautiful apartment when we came across his piece, Sonic Blossom, which had actually first premiered in a museum in Korea. A singer dressed in beautiful costume-designed gown would walk over and choose a viewer in the museum and ask, "May I give you a gift of song?" And then walk that person over, if they accepted, of course, to a chair and sit down. Of course, the furniture was also designed by Mingwei. And I feel like I'm giving away so much. I'm not going to continue with that part. You have to experience it. I was really touched by the work, felt its significance immediately, and thinking out loud, I said, "This is a perfect piece for the Met, a place full of beautiful classic objects that transports one to the past. Walking at the Met among all those shimmering precious stones and objects, I yearned for something more alive or in the flesh." Mingwei replied, "That is what I've been thinking about exactly." What a remarkable intervention, but also a great juxtaposition of the classic and contemporary. I promised Mingwei right there and then, let's make it happen as the signature exhibition of the next Asia Contemporary Art Week. Of course, it took about a year and a half or more, I think 2 years, of meetings and connecting with colleagues at the Met and fundraising for the show to be scheduled. And we're very grateful to the Taipei Cultural Center for their support of the exhibition, which opened on Friday, the 30th of October, and will be on until November 8th. So you all have, if you didn't have a chance to go yesterday and experience it, can go at any time between now and November 8th. I want to thank the Metropolitan Museum for their just taking on something as significant as that project, and I think that also signifies the shift and the change that major museums are willing to do things differently. So we should be very hopeful. Yesterday there were sessions that people were getting a little upset, and just let's remain positive that change happens through individuals. The event was this exhibition was possible because I met Ian, who is a curator in the contemporary department in the Metropolitan, and we thought, what can we do together? So it's always about individuals. We can't just focus on the institution. The institution is just a machine, and the machines can't think, they don't do. It's the individuals who do and think. Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna let the day begin with Mingwei and HG Masters. You should familiarize yourself with everybody's incredible resumes, because we don't have time to introduce everyone. The field meeting pamphlet has everybody's short bios, and the narrative has also a little bit of more of what the day will unfold. Thank you so much. Please stay and come back on time after the breaks and lunch.
Good morning. I see you have your timer.
We're gonna do as we're told and try to stick to the schedule.
Okay.
But first of all, thank you, Leeza, for putting together this program. Yesterday was a great day. Really interesting and wonderful to see a lot of people who are in this corner of the art world all in one place. It's really great. So I'm HG Masters. I'm an editor-at-large for Art Asia Pacific magazine, which used to be based in New York, and now we're in Hong Kong, and I'm in Istanbul and Boston these days, which is part of why it's so nice to be back in New York and to see how things have developed and continued, let's say, in this Asian field in the last few years. And as many people have been saying, there's a kind of institutional, new and but still developing institutional embrace. So I'm just going to say, or actually read a short thing that I wrote about Mingwei's practice. Mingwei is then going to present more specifically about 4 projects.
Yes.
And then we'll talk a little bit, but after that, if there are questions and if people want to engage, or even react, that would be great. And we'll all do that within 40 minutes or so.
Yep. Yes.
So, Li Mingwei's practice from the early 90s set in motion the themes he continues to work with today. The vitality of human contact, the sharing of biographies and experiences, sometimes derived from his own, and the richness that people bring and their stories to objects and places. He's invited scores of strangers to dine with him, to spend the night in a room with him, to bring their old clothes to be mended by him, to write the letters they have always meant to. Projects that roughly can be said to fall into a category of works in which Mingwei stages human interactions against the loneliness of the gallery or the studio. His other tendency is to leave the studio behind altogether, to go out into the world or to send others out there, to improve things, to renovate an old house, for instance, to make a space for tea ceremonies, or even going further afield, to allow people to take him out into the cities, to give them tours. Tours not of grand sights, but of personal significance or interest. Finally, there's perhaps a new tendency in his work. an interest in using the museum or historical site not as just a setting, but one whose existing community and context can be a stage for highly dramatic events. A sound installation deploying canaries, wind chimes, and music students. Or the tossing of ceramic vessels through the atrium of the old colonial building. Or even the bestowing of a beautiful song on an unsuspecting stranger who might have come somewhere to look and not to hear. While some actions are dramatic and others are commonplace, they each take us out of the expected or the routine, transforming discomfort into the extraordinary, giving the gift of heightened experience and the pleasures of memory and its recollections that have their own regenerating life cycles. So we'll look at 4 specific projects, but I just wanted to think about your work in all of its different forms, and then we'll talk about it.
Good.
I'm just going to slide around.
Yeah, I think I'll move around a little bit. Yeah. Stay, please stay. So, I don't dance nor sing. What I'm going to do for you is to share 4 stories. All these are projects I've done, and they stand in their own right as a project. They're all participatory in some form or another. The first project is called Through Master's Eyes. This was a commission by LACMA in 2004. So the contemporary curator asked me to go to the museum and have a discussion with the classical curator. So 3 of us were in the same room. You can just imagine the kind of conversation that came up, or discussion about what art is and how does the East and West look at art and all these very confusing issues. At the end, I said, well, why don't I do a project that is based on the idea of copying and imitation on a Western idea of that and an Eastern idea of that. So I went into the Chinese collection and saw a set of Shi Tao's painting, who was a late Ming Dynasty painter. And this set of painting used to belong to Jianlong Emperor, and now it's in AHMADY collection. So I took this painting and invited 2 sets of artists. The first set lives in Taiwan, and the second set are artists living in the West. So the idea is that first artists for each set were giving the facsimile of this painting. Their job is to create or copy or imitate according to their idea of copying. After they finish their painting, they would need to give their painting to the next one in line, and the next one would do the same thing. So the line continues. I'm going to show you the evolution of these 2 sets of artists, okay? So this is Shi Tao. The first set we're going to see are artists living in the West. Some of them had Chinese training. For example, Zhang Hong, Arma Chan. So you could see that the idea of copying already has transformed quite a bit from the original one to Zhang Hong. It's very individualistic, right? So Zhang Hong gave it to the next artist. Wow, quite different, right? He's a Mexican-American artist living in LA. The third one copied from this one. Yes, it looks almost like Las Vegas, right? Somebody playing golf or something there, meditating. 4th one. And remember, these are artists living in the West, and some of them have Asian background. Su Meiqi lived in or lives in Berlin, of Chinese and English descent. So she took the thing is that they were all able to go online to see the original Shi Tao, which made it even more difficult, and have this other master in front of them. And then when I took Sumei's to Shazia Sikander, I said, Shazia, I'm so sorry, there's no color on Sumei's. But Shazia just put her finger along Sumei's painting and say, this is magnificent. And that's what she created. Okay. Let's go back to Shi Tao and see what the Taiwanese artists did. And their idea of copying is so different from the West, right? The first one, very similar. Second one. Third one, still quite similar. The form is still there. Next one. Still very similar. And if you read Chinese, he highlighted the 3 characters, yi, hua, nan, which means a very difficult painting. The last one. So Mr. Lin, what he did was that he did a 2.5-minute animation, absolutely beautiful, of this little child going up, meeting the master on the path, ascending to the sky with a brush and painting himself into the painting. Back into Lagama space, what I did was I created a kiosk here, and I'll explain why I created that kiosk later. So on this side, on the left side, right here, that is the set of original Shutao. This line here are of the Taiwanese, so starting from this, and then on here are the Western, starting on the left to the right. So a little bit to share with you the Shutao's painting here. You see, this was the one that I borrowed, but it actually was a set of an album. When Qianlong had it, it was an album as such, like that. However, when somebody acquired and when it came into Lagma collection in the early 1900s, it was cut completely so it could be framed and presented in a Western style. And it was because of my project, they use magnifying technology to realize where the tear of the fiber is, and therefore able to realign and renumber the pages. Original Shutao from 1642. The Taiwanese on the top, starting from here, and Western living artists. So what I did was I did a facsimile of those copies and made an album, so people are being reintroduced with the idea of how to look at an album, a very East Asian way of experiencing artwork through time, I suppose. Second story, the Mending Project, the one that Leeza mentioned. So this was at Number Free Gallery in 2009. What I did was I just sat at the gallery with this table and chairs. Anybody can bring clothes for me to repair. So these are usually clothing that for people like you and me, it doesn't mean anything. They're not made of expensive things. However, for the people who brought these things, they are very, very personal. It has a lot of meaning. So they would sit in front of me while I mend the clothes. After 15-20 minutes of conversation and mending, I asked them if I could keep this piece of clothing for the duration of the expression. So the reason is because I would pull threads from this wall and attach to each piece of clothing. The project is progressive. Gradually, it grows from one piece of clothes to 10 to 20 to 30 to 4,000, to 400, not 4,000, 420 at the end of 1 month of expression. I'm not a very good mender, so this is how I end. I use a lot of very colorful clothing, not clothing, but thread. And one of the reasons is because I also want to celebrate this piece of clothing that is something important to you, using bright color. This is another way of me doing the mending. Nobody complained so far, so that was very generous of those people. This was taken around the 3rd week of the expression. Gradually, a lot of threads were crisscrossing, making connection. This picture means a lot to me. This was about the 2nd day before this exhibition closed. So this young lady was a medical school student, and she heard of a show, so she brought something for me to mend a few days ago. She loved it, went back to tell her mother. And both of them came, and she brought something for me, went back and told the grandmother. So today was the day that all three ladies of three generations were there for me to repair their clothes. When I presented this in Boston, somebody actually knows these people in the picture, so that is so lovely. Last day of exhibition, everybody came to get their clothing. Gradually, the threads were all cut. This was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm sorry. This was the 6 o'clock in the afternoon. You can see thousands of threads on the floor still attached to the spool, but we have 420 mended pieces of clothing, some floating somewhere in New York with colorful threads. So when this project was presented in Sydney, Liverpool, and more in Taipei, because I wasn't able to stay in the city for 3.5 months, what I did was that sometimes I was sitting there to mend, and the rest of the time, other volunteers took over. It is very important for me that my work is not about Mingwel. It's more about a stranger sitting there to do something, a gift-giving gesture from another stranger. So we had, when this was at Taipei Fine Art, after Mori Art Museum, there were about 6 Japanese vendors voluntarily came at different time and came and helped me mend in Taipei. It was so moving that they created a strong bonding between them. Third story, Bodhi Tree Project. This was a commission for the inauguration of the Gallery of Modern Art in Queensland, Brisbane, in Australia. So, most of you know about Siddhartha, the historical Buddha. 2,500 years ago, he was sitting underneath a Bodhi tree and then enlightened, right? So that Bodhi tree became a sacred object. So there were a lot of universities and also palaces built around the tree. However, around 2,300 BC, 2,300 years ago, which is 200 years later after his enlightenment, there was an eradication of Buddhism. There were these soldiers and gangsters coming toward the palace, and their goal was to cut and burn this tree, which witnessed the enlightenment of Buddha. So at that time, the reigning king was King Ashoka, and his daughter was Princess Sanghamitta, who happened to be a Buddhist nun. So she heard of this destructive force coming to her father's palace. What she did was that she went into the palace, took a sapling from that tree and some seeds, hid in her robe, and escaped to Ceylon, which is right now Sri Lanka. What you see here is a painting in Sri Lanka depicting that voyage from India to Sri Lanka 2,300 years ago. So what does it have to do with me? When the curator at ACAW asked me to do a new project for the museum, I said, I'm going to plant a tree, but not just a simple tree. So you probably guessed it. So I say I'm going to go to Sri Lanka and work with the government and high priest to bring a sapling from this original tree back to Goma as a tree, as a sacred object, but also as an artwork. So what you're seeing here is that original tree that Princess Sanghamitta planted thousands of years ago. She's very, very large now. It took us 4 years to work with the government because it's a sacred object that no secular institution or secular place or institution has ever had this privilege of having a sacred tree. It always has been a spiritual place. So finally, after my last trip there, before I went to get the sapling, I told the high priest that for me and for some of my friends, I don't go to temples anymore, or churches, or mosques. I go to museum to have that sense of enlightenment. And that he understands. He said, okay, I understand what you're saying. Please come back in 8 months. I will prepare the sapling for you. So just to show you, this was right at before I arrived, somebody took a picture underneath the parasol. That was the little plant, this one here, that he prepared for me to bring back for the planting at Gallery Mahon Art. For 24/7, for a whole week, all the villagers heard of this guy coming to get a sapling, going to Australia. So they all sat around the mother tree for a whole week, just chanting to the tree to prepare for the departure of this beautiful being. So there she was. When the high priest handed over to me, I literally was shaken and I thought I was going to drop the plant because it was so heavy in terms of emotional and historical burden on me. Instead of speaking Pali, he said to the tree in English, and I really think it was for my sake. He said, you as a Bodhi tree, you're going to go to an exotic land called Australia that no sacred tree has ever been to. So please be strong and grow big and huge so you can create shades and shadow for the children and the birds there. He didn't say anything about Buddhism, but that really is the essence of spiritual practice for any religion. So, with this tree in my hand, I was able to walk around the mother tree, and went back to Australia. I was silly enough that I actually took this sapling on my hand and got onto Qantas airline, and they stopped me right there. They said, this is an exotic tree, you cannot just bring it into Australia and Big Island. So I actually had to work with a DHL and had to send it over. For 6 months, she was in a quarantine, and it just happened that the custom office was from Sri Lanka, and her house was only a mile away from this tree. 2008, the opening of Goma, I was very lucky to work with the Taiwanese nuns from Fort Guangshan, and so they came and chanted with the tree and created this beautiful ceremony. So now, every year on Buddha's birthday, they will come and chant to the tree so it's imbued in sacred energy. A few years later, somebody took a picture and sent it to me, so you can see the father and the child. So now, when you go to Goma, please go say hello to her. Her life, I always say she, just because I feel very intimate with her. Her life is going to be about 4,000 years old, and I am sure she's going to outlast every single one of us and everything around her. The other day, I actually received something from Goma, which I was very moved. It was a tree doctor's report, and also from the conservation department. So that was a very, very poetic and beautiful way of speaking of this project. Okay, the last story, Guernica Sand. This was by Pablo, 1937. His very, very profound reaction to the bombing of Guernica. What I did was that I created a very large sand painting, which was larger than the actual Pablo Picasso's Guernica. So there are 3 stages to this performance of piece. The first stage is stationary like this for about 7 or 8 weeks. This is all you see. And I just want to point out right here, you can see that is kind of unfinished with buckets there. Okay, there's a reason. So for 7 weeks, this is what you see. On the 8th week, Monday morning at sunrise, I walk onto the sand painting. You can see the scale of the sand painting. Start to finish that last part. This is a critical moment because this, not only that I start finishing last part, but also it's a signal that one person from the audience is allowed to walk onto the sand painting. So there it goes. We don't want to talk about destruction and creation at this moment because this person might actually be creating something, right? But for me, I was in tears. It was a very difficult task because we spent almost 800 hours on this painting. Thank goodness I had students help on this. Gradually, it's been transformed. This was about 4 o'clock, right before the sunset. I also had a little rock there for people to just stand and watch what is happening and think. At dusk, before sunset, I stop the last person, spend some time patching up what people do. And then myself with 3 assistants, each one of us had a broom, start brushing the sand to the middle. You can tell that it was burning up. So at dusk, sunset, it was like this. And 8 hours before this, it was like that. So the project stayed like this for the next duration of the discussion. No interaction. So the interaction was only 1 day. Okay, so that's the 4 stories I'm going to share with you. We'll have, okay, so we'll talk a little bit and then we'll open up for Q&A. Thank you so much.
Can I ask you, what happened to the sand?
Yes.
And maybe that could be a way for us to, I keep asking about, or myself about, what the afterlife of your projects is.
Yes,
You know,
okay. As you know that Tibetan Buddhism has this mandala ceremony, creation and destruction. So ideally, at each time when we did this project, we tried to work with a recycle center. And sometimes they did take all these sand, and sometimes this recycling rule is so strict that they were saying that the black sand has a little bit of more crystal, so we don't want children to hurt their finger when they play with it. So it really depends. It's quite complex after, and usually we were able to recycle it to go back to building structure. Yes.
And then, so more largely about documentation and how these things live on, like something like the Mending Project and these different incarnations. I mean, just how are you organizing sort of archives and records? How much material do you make, and how interested are you in all of that?
That's a very good question. I always have some issues and problem with documentation. I'm still learning what is the best way to do it, and each project is very different. So when Mami Kataoka, the chief here at Mori Art Museum, say, let's do a survey show of yours, the next question is, do you have any archival material or any images? And that really made me very aware that there is some documentation I need to do. So often what you see here, for example, these images, of course, they're for real space and real time. Some of the projects I did, I actually invite participants back to reenact the process. Therefore, I have some materials there because sometimes I feel if a camera is there or a video is there, it really influences the content of the work and my participation. And I don't want to exploit my participant for my documentation.
I read that when you had this first show at the Whitney in 1998, you invited people over to have dinner in the museum after it was closed.
Yes.
Prepared dinner, but you also recorded their conversations.
Yes.
And then the next day would kind of play.
That's right, yeah. That was right after graduating from Yale in 1997, so this whole thing about documentation, the first thing my professor asked, like, what about documentation? So you're right, I actually did a recording of the conversation I had with this individual person. However, I purposely muffled the recording, so you only can hear an ambient sound that someone is murmuring to, so you can't really hear the content. So whenever we do the dining project, that's kind of what I do now. I don't really, you can't really hear the content, but you know there were people there talking. So it's not about voyeurism. It's more about this is happening, and you can put your name in the lottery and see if this could also happen to near me.
But then, in terms of preserving other people's experiences of these projects, or cataloging them, or are you just happy to let them go out?
I'm very happy to let them go out because if I start categorizing or collecting information, it almost seems like I'm a scientist rather than an artist. I'm collecting data. And also I'm a very lazy artist, so that will be too much work for me. I'd rather have these things just go on and have their own life. And yesterday it was very interesting. I was talking to the education center at the Met. And she said, I actually was at the Whitney when you did the letter writing project, which was a part of my solo show there. So people were allowed to go in and write letters of forgiveness and gratitude, and then if you know the address, they would send it out. So she said that it was a very life-changing experience for her because one of her students wrote a letter of coming out to his father in South America, and then he put the address on the next block, and then that night we collected and sent it out. But the day after, he was so nervous, he came back and said, can you retrieve that letter? But we couldn't because it's already sent out. Anyways, to make the long story short, he had a very, very violent relationship with his family for the next 2 years. And then gradually they accepted him of being gay. And then he went on to become a wonderful gay and lesbian transgender leader in South America. And unfortunately, he died a few weeks ago of accident. He was coming back and then trying to get into his apartment because he didn't have a key. He climbed out a window and fell. So, stories like that comes back to me, and it really made me a different person, realizing my project had these effects, and without documenting them purposely.
And I mean, as someone who talks to you and also as you speak in public, then these stories also get reshared in this kind of oral tradition way, which I do find quite nice. And you're often present when your performances or installations are happening, so that people are giving you this kind of feedback in real time.
Exactly. And most of the people do not know how I look like, so I could eavesdrop of what they're saying. It's really quite fantastic.
I want to rewind a little bit and just ask you to talk about how you came to this participatory installation performance thing that you do, because it's so unique and kind of your own. And you had an exhibition right after you finished graduate school of a kind of completed, or not completed, but fully formed idea of a practice.
Yes.
And so maybe you could talk a little bit about it.
Yes. I actually was trained in biology and architecture in undergraduate, and actually I was a weaver for many years. So, when I was in California, I read a lot of books by Joseph Kasuf, and so a lot of those thinkers and artists have Zen Buddhist practice background with Suzuki. So that has a lot of influence in terms of what I do. So after being a weaver and architect for many years, I feel like weaving is really not the way I want to do, because after spending 3 months, I have something like a little doormat just in front of me. It's ugly and it's not what I want. So I thought, okay, I'm just gonna, and then when I applied for graduate school for Yale, my professors looked at my images and said, you're not gonna get into any of the schools if you kept producing these doormats and table runners. Just do something for yourself. So I basically created 3 projects that is meaningful for me, and then those were the very first original participatory work, which I didn't know there were names like that. So for the first year at Yale, what I did was I just did a tiny project because I was so desperate to meet people and to find people and also to feed myself. So I thought, okay, what can I do? So spend $10 each meal, and I still have someone sitting in front of me and just include me in their community, and that was incredibly. I feel so grateful that people are willing to be a part of my life in that way.
And what was the kind of reaction to?
When I put posters around campus asking people who were interested in introspective conversation and food sharing, I had about 45 messages in my machine at that time. And most of the people thought I was crazy. And so, do I have to pay anything to have? I said, no, just come and tell me what you'd like to eat. I'll try my best to prepare the meal for you. And that was the whole year project I did there.
And in terms of professors and fellows?
There was fun, yeah. And interestingly, you mentioned about professor because one of my professor was Mahon, and she said, Mingwel, do you know there is an artist by the name of who's doing, something with food. He cooked curry, and I at that time I still had no idea about this because coming from a science background, I didn't know anything about art. I said no. Ronnie said, well, let's invite Rick to teach. So he did come, and we had a beautiful conversation. Basically, at the end, he said, Mingwel, what we're doing in terms of your dining project and my curry project is that we both are using food as a medium, but the outcome is so different. For me, Rick would want to say, for me, it's a very introverted project. Although superficially everybody comes and enjoy the meal, it's very extroverted. But as an artist, I wasn't there. I was behind the scene. So I retrieved myself back, and for me, it's very introvert. But for you, seemingly an introverted project because when you're cooking, you're dining with this person, the museum was closed, right? No one was there. But for an artist, it's a very extroverted project. So I'm very grateful that we had that conversation because often people do bring up these two projects and talk about it. I internally thank my teachers for that.
I wanted to ask you also about this idea of how you saw yourself in relation to other people and these kind of trajectories or traditions now, like relational aesthetics, or also kind of ACAW-like performative installations, which are not necessarily actor, stage, performer, audience, but very fluid. And I mean, as you described, maybe your own practice comes from a personal place and also an inner place. But in the last 20 years, let's say, how have you come to see yourself in relation to those other formulations?
Yeah, I don't think I have a full answer for that question because I'm still forming my own answer, searching. About 5 years ago, Glenn Lowry asked Tino and myself to have a conversation in MoMA, particularly about art practice. And afterward, Tino and I had a drink, and then it's fascinating that if I see a participating project, for example, what Tino did at Guggenheim, he said, "Come and experience this." I actually was very nervous. I shied away from it. So when most of you probably saw that project of you going up to the ramp and the child first encounter his name. So when the child came to me, I was very naughty. I said, "No, speak English," and the child just completely just went to the next person, and somehow the next few persons saw that, and no one came to talk to me. And so I was left alone to experience this and witness what happened. So there are many different ways of talking about participatory projects related to aesthetic. Just like when you take an oil paint, you can paint 10,000 different kind of painting. So I'm very happy that there are many, many different ways and forms of talking about this.
But so maybe in a larger way, I mean, thinking about the Through the Master's Eyes project, is there a kind of art historical, a larger one, a framework that you think about yourself?
I do think, although I'm in a contemporary practice, I do think I'm a classical artist, just because of my aesthetic is much more classical. And the Met, yesterday I was telling my friend, and I said that the Met is really my playground. I haven't gone to MoMA or Videographer for many years. I usually just go to the Met and play and look at these amazing things that our ancestors left for us. So I think that's a larger framework for me, that I play within the arena of classical aesthetic.
And by classical, you mean, and which ancestors?
All human.
Because you also play classical music.
I do. I play violin. Yes, I was trained as a failed violinist.
And you were trained as a
Yes. Yeah. So in terms of classical, I mean in kind of a bigger frame of humanity, rather than Chinese or Japanese or Western classical.
Right, and I think that's the musical aspect of your background might also be important to know, because Tina Segal, for example, comes from a dance background.
Yes.
And so that's just and you have this textile and music background as opposed to a very kind of orthodox, smart visual argument.
Yeah. The other day I went to visit my professor, a weaving professor, and she said, "Oh, do you still do weaving?" And I said, "Yes, I still do it. The warp and weft are actually human relationship now, rather than the actual textile warp and weft."
Do you want to say anything about Sonic Blossom?
Okay. Sonic Blossom. Leeza said it very nicely, and how the origination of that project. So about 3.5 years ago, a curator from Taipei asked me to do a show for the inauguration of the National Museum of Modern Contemporary Art and Soul. She said, "Well, what can you propose a new idea?" And at that time, I was taking care of my mother back in Taiwan when she was having open heart surgery. So I said, "Can you please give me 3 weeks? Let me take care of mom first, and then I might have the energy and the talent to think of something else." So while taking care of mom, I played Schubert's Lieder for her. You might ask, why Schubert and not Madonna or Britney Spears? So, Leeza, maybe I'll play Madonna for you. So, when I was growing up in Taiwan, the summer nights were very, very hot. Mom would always play classical music, but often in a very small volume, very low volume. And that night, she played Schubert's Lieder, and I said, "Mom, can you please turn it up? I couldn't hear Schubert." She said, "Well, honey, you just need to sit down and be very quiet, and then you can hear Schubert singing." Of course, it wasn't Schubert singing. So I played the same music for her, and it was a very, very beautiful experience. It bring back so much memory about our childhood. And that's where the idea of the gift giving, not between people, but between strangers come. So please go to the Met if you can, and be on until November 8th. And today, starting today to next Thursday, morning to evening, it's going to be at the Sackler Great Buddha Room. And then from Friday to Sunday, it will go back to the Contemporary Gallery. Okay, thank you.
And maybe just because we have a few minutes, maybe if anyone wants to ask maybe a question. Not that he's not very approachable all the time to answer anything, but do we have microphones or should we just go? Okay, so maybe one there and then
I'll repeat this question.
Okay, great.
How do we know this artwork? The timings of when you started and how long you lasted, the actual date?
Okay. So his question is about Burning on Sand. How long is the actual performance? So basically it was from the morning of sunrise to the sunset. Because the bombing of Vertigo happened in one day. In fact, it started at sunrise and then finished at sunset. And so that was a nice coincidence. So it only happened during one day. Yes. 2 more. Yes.
All the way back.
Just a quick question, actually. So I
Can you
noticed.
stand up and project your voice?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I noticed yesterday at Sonic Blossom, there's a set of speakers and a singer and a chair. And when you were showing the slideshow in the end of the piece, it looked like a very similar chair. And I was wondering if it was in fact the same chair, and if so, if there's a significance.
Okay. So his statement or question is that when he was at Sonic Blossom, the chair looked exactly like the one at Mendy. You're right. You're very observant. My design, my furniture is usually very simple, and if I can reuse a prop from the other project and recycle, I try to do that. I think it's important that the furniture of or the installation of my project should not be too complex, because it might take away the content of the work. So yes, these are similar, not exactly the same chair, but similar chairs. Yes, please.
I got picked.
Oh, she got picked. Sonic Blossom. Okay.
Yes, I went up after the session and
Yes.
had the great pleasure of just being chosen without any knowing what was happening. And I understand German and was listening. And of course, there's this line that the singer especially emphasized, which is now everything, alles muss sich wenden, alles. And that, the word wenden means can be turned and it can mean change, which is the way it's usually translated, but it can also mean transformation.
Yes.
And I was wondering, how precisely did you choose this piece?
Oh, okay.
And in relationship to the story you just told about your mum,
Yes.
what that means?
Thank you so much. I actually didn't really understand too much about the lyric. Not that close, because I don't speak German. I chosen 5 of the leader out of 12 that was on that disc. And just because the melody, the sonicscape of these music are so heartbreakingly beautiful. And when this project was in Seoul, Beijing, Tokyo, Taipei, most of the people do not speak German, but they still are very moved, and mainly because of the sonic scape. And I'm very, very happy that you shared that with me, because now I have a deeper understanding of that project relating to my mother and also to the singers. The singers, we work with Manhattan School Music singers, and they all came for audition. So we have 12 of them, absolutely fantastic ones. They were telling me that they originally thought that they were the one who's giving the gift. But very quickly they realized the gift is coming back to them within just a few seconds when they open their mouth, because the person was responding to their voice. That sometimes the person started crying that affected them so much that they couldn't continue singing. So yeah, and that happens all the time. And I think most of the people who receive this would not understand the text, but of course if they can understand the text, they will have a deeper, more profound understanding of this work. Thank you.
Thank you for the gift.
Oh, you're most welcome. Okay, I'm around. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.